Are you sure about this, Emily? Sarah's voice wavered as she stared at her best friend's smartphone. The YouTube video paused on a frame displaying a strange, archaic symbol. Come on, Sarah, don't be such a scaredy cat, Emily retorted, smirking. We've watched 1,000 horror movies, and you're afraid of a YouTube video? Their friend Lisa, a horror junkie like Emily but a skeptic at heart, chimed in. Yeah, what's the worst that could happen? It's just a video. After ensuring their parents were still out for the evening, Emily hit play. The screen flickered weirdly as the video resumed. An unnerving voice recited an incantation in a language none of them recognized. The room grew colder. Shadows seemed to deepen. Okay, this is getting creepy, Lisa admitted, glancing nervously around the room. SHH, it's almost over, Emily said, her eyes fixed on the screen. And then it was. The video ended abruptly, leaving behind a screen filled with YouTube's suggested next videos, makeup tutorials, vlogs, and the like. See? Nothing happened, Lisa said, laughing nervously. But Sarah pointed at the window. Then what's that? They all turned and gasped. On the frosted glass was the same symbol from the video, drawn as if by an invisible hand. Suddenly, the electricity flickered and the room plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the eerie glow of Emily's smartphone screen. And in that half-light, they saw it, a figure materializing from the shadows. Its skin was deathly pale, crisscrossed with pulsing blue veins. Its eyes were massive, dark sockets, and its mouth was a gaping void filled with razor-sharp teeth. Is this some sort of prank, Emily? Lisa's voice quivered. I swear, I didn't. The demon lunged, its form a blur. Lisa screamed, a high-pitched sound that was abruptly cut off. When Emily's phone light flickered back on, Lisa was gone. Run! Sarah screamed, bolting towards the door. Emily followed, her heart pounding. They made it to the kitchen, slamming the door behind them. Sarah grabbed a knife from the drawer, her hands trembling. We have to end this, Emily said, tears in her eyes. We have to. The demon phased through the door as if it were smoke. Sarah lunged with the knife, but the demon flicked its wrist, and the knife flew across the room. Smiling its monstrous smile, it lunged again. Epilogue. When the parents returned, the house was empty. The police found no signs of a struggle, no signs of a break-in. Only Emily's smartphone, still on, displaying the YouTube video that started it all. The girls were never found. The only thing that remained was the haunting image of the symbol, now burned into the living room window, and a new video uploaded on YouTube, titled The Forbidden Stream, Do Not Watch. People say that if you pause at just the right moment, you can see the faces of Emily, Sarah, and Lisa in the background, their eyes wide with terror, their mouths opened in a silent scream. And so, the video remained a digital tombstone for the three girls who had dared to delve into a darkness far beyond their understanding, waiting for the next unsuspecting viewer to press play. Crash Course, A Desperate Measure. Part 1. Matthew had been out of work for months. In his impoverished Eastern European hometown, jobs were as scarce as hope itself. So, when he saw an online ad offering an unspecified one-day job with a substantial payout, he jumped at the chance. What did he have to lose? A helicopter was arranged to pick him up. The very notion of flying in such luxury contrasted sharply with his desperate circumstances, deepening his unease. He climbed aboard, each thud of the rotors amplifying his growing dread. Upon landing, he was ushered into a bleak facility, all concrete and steel, where he filled out a labyrinth of forms. When asked if anyone close to him had access to the bank account where the funds would be deposited, Matthew admitted that his mother did. The staff member made a note of it, an action that filled Matthew with inexplicable concern. After going through a series of exhaustive medical tests, Matthew began to drift into unconsciousness, courtesy of a sedative he'd been given for his comfort, they said. Part 2. He woke up in semi-darkness, disoriented and confined. It took him a moment to realize he was locked into some sort of machine, strapped in, sensors attached to his body. Panic surged through him. Just then, the lights flickered on, revealing a grim reality. He was inside a car, restrained and rigged with countless wires. As his eyes adjusted to the light, Matthew saw a row of crushed, contorted cars in the distance, each covered in a white cloth that bore ominous dark stains. A voice echoed through an intercom. Crash test beginning in 30 seconds. The horror struck him with full force. He was the test subject for a high-impact crash. As the car started accelerating, his thoughts scattered between flashes of his life, his unemployed desperation, and his mother, the unsuspecting beneficiary should the unthinkable happen. The car hurtled toward a wall of concrete. In the final seconds, all Matthew could think about was the choices that led him here: a quest for easy money, a life of unmet promises, and a white cloth that might soon cover another wreck, another life lost to desperate circumstances. And then, impact. Part 3. Matthew came to in a hospital bed within the same facility, bruised but somehow intact. A technician handed him an envelope. "Your compensation," he said. Matthew looked at the envelope, his mind grappling with the value of his own life, risked for quick cash. "My mother," he croaked. "She has access to this account." "Was that your fallback, in case I didn't make it?" The technician's eyes were as cold as the steel that built this place. "We take all necessary precautions." Matthew left the facility with an envelope full of money but a spirit devoid of any worth. He had gambled his life in the most desperate way possible and lived to regret it, forever haunted by the image of crumpled cars and white shrouds. The helicopter ride back was a quiet one. He didn't look at the landscape, once filled with despair, that unfolded beneath him. Instead, his eyes were closed, pondering a future where choices were made not out of desperation but a newfound understanding of life's fragility. He touched down in his hometown, a place devoid of opportunity but rich in lessons learned the hardest way. Matthew stepped out, took a deep breath, and walked back into a life that he knew he needed to change, because he had seen the price of not doing so, and it was terrifyingly high. Life in the Addams family mansion was anything but ordinary, but Wednesday Addams craved a particular kind of excitement that even her family's dark endeavors could not quench. She found her chance when Gomez Addams presented a new addition to the family's trove of oddities, a cursed amulet with a twisted history. This amulet, Gomez told his intrigued family, is said to contain the power to alter time itself. It once belonged to a sorcerer who was too daring for his own good. A mischievous glint flashed in Wednesday's eyes. "Where did you get it?" "Ah, the Underworld's auction. A truly fascinating place, full of items that shouldn't exist," Gomez replied, savoring each word. That night, the amulet was safely stored in a secret chamber, guarded by various booby traps only an Addams could navigate, or so they thought. By morning, the amulet had vanished. The family was in an uproar. Gomez was flabbergasted, Morticia was unusually unsettled, and Pugsley was just disappointed he hadn't thought to steal it first. Wednesday, however, saw this as an opportunity, a mystery yearning to be solved. With the air of a seasoned detective in a film noir, she donned her wide-brimmed hat and declared, "I'll find the amulet and the one responsible for its disappearance." Armed with her knowledge of dark magic and her affinity for solving enigmas, she began her investigation. Lurch became her unwilling assistant, mostly used to reach high places or intimidate potential witnesses. Her first clue led her to Cousin ITT, who, though impossible to understand, seemed to be murmuring something about shadows in the room. She then discovered strange etchings near the chamber where the amulet was kept. They were symbols used in time manipulation spells. Her eyes narrowed. This was not just a simple theft, it was a disappearance act, involving mystical elements far beyond ordinary human understanding. Using her own set of mystical tools, she cast a spell that could trace the last remnants of magic around the chamber. A spectral trail appeared, a wispy line of light leading her out of the room, down the staircase, and into the basement. The basement was filled with trinkets from failed magical experiments and a collection of questionable substances. There, she found an old book open to a page on time manipulation spells, and beside it, a shadow so dark it seemed to absorb all light around it. As she reached for the shadow, it suddenly lashed out, as if alive, wrapping itself around her hand like a snake. Shocked but not frightened, Wednesday quickly chanted a dispelling spell. The shadow shrieked, relinquishing its hold and recoiling into a dark corner. And that's when she saw it, the missing amulet, levitating in a sphere of dark energy. But before she could reach out and grab it, the amulet and the sphere shot up and vanished into thin air. She heard a voice echoing in the darkness, whispering words that filled even Wednesday Addams with a sense of dread. "You are too late, Wednesday. The ritual is complete, and time is no longer your ally." The room suddenly went dark, and she felt herself being pulled into an abyss. She tried to resist, but the force was too strong. Just as she felt herself losing consciousness, she heard a voice, almost a whisper, saying, "Welcome to a time that is not your own." Wednesday awoke in a room shrouded in darkness. As her eyes adjusted, she realized she was in her own bedroom, but something was different. The room was layered with dust, the wallpaper was peeling, and her collection of antique weapons was missing. She felt a sudden surge of annoyance. Those weapons had been hard to acquire. Stepping outside her room, she realized the entire mansion was in a state of decay. It was as if time had ravaged the house, leaving it a mere shell of its former self. Her mind raced through the incantations and rituals she knew, trying to figure out how to reverse whatever had been done. But first, she needed to find that amulet. She descended the staircase, each step creaking under her weight. Reaching the living room, she saw figures that made her heart drop, her family, but older, almost unrecognizable. Gomez looked weary, Morticia appeared sorrowful, and Pugsley seemed downright conventional. "Gomez," she tried, "what year is this?" Gomez looked puzzled. "Why, Wednesday, it's the same year it's been for a long time. Ever since the amulet was activated, we've been living the same day over and over again. Time has stopped for the world, but not for us." "An eternal loop," Wednesday muttered, the horrific implications settling in. Her family was trapped in a never-ending cycle, aging while the world around them stood still. "That's why the house is like this," Morticia added softly. "We've been maintaining it for years, but we're growing tired, my dear." Wednesday felt a wave of guilt wash over her. Her family's predicament was a direct result of the stolen amulet, a case she had vowed to solve. "I'll fix this," she declared, her voice filled with a conviction that seemed to lift the weight off her family's shoulders. Rushing back to the basement, she found the old book still open to the page on time manipulation spells. Scanning through it, her eyes landed on a counterspell that required a relic of equal or greater power. Wednesday smirked. She had just the thing, a pocket watch from the seventh circle of hell, a family heirloom. Holding the pocket watch in one hand and chanting the counterspell, she felt the room's dark energy begin to swirl around her, forming a vortex. The shadowy figure from before materialized, screaming in fury. "You cannot undo what's been done." With a final shout of the spell's last word, Wednesday threw the pocket watch into the vortex. A blinding light erupted, swallowing the shadow and dispersing the dark energy. She felt a tug at her navel and then nothingness. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the mansion. Everything was as it should be, rich in its beautiful, terrifying glory. Her family rushed to greet her, back to their original, younger selves, oblivious to the loop they had escaped. But Wednesday noticed something different, a newfound appreciation in their eyes, a sense of relief that seemed to come from dodging an unseen bullet. The amulet was back in its chamber, deactivated and powerless. But as Wednesday looked at it one last time, she wondered about the shadowy figure, the dark entity that had almost doomed her family. As if reading her thoughts, Gomez said, "Ah, my dear, some mysteries are best left unsolved." But Wednesday knew better. Some mysteries were not just puzzles to be solved, they were warnings, omens of the lurking darkness within us all, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And so, the Addams family continued their peculiar life, forever cherishing their strange but unbreakable bond, all thanks to Wednesday, the young detective, the budding sorceress, but most importantly, the dutiful daughter who had saved them from a fate worse than death itself. The Haunting of Wednesday Addams, The Shadow on the Wall. In the spine-chilling mansion of the Addams family, where cobwebs were decor and the bizarre was mundane, Wednesday Addams was a riddle wrapped in an enigma, clad in black, of course. But even Wednesday found herself bewildered by the events of one particularly eerie evening, an episode that would defy the very fabric of her dark reality. It started as a full moon shone brightly in the sky, casting curious glows upon the mansion. The rest of the Addams family, Gomez, Morticia, Pugsley, and the rest, were preoccupied with their own strange affairs. Uncle Fester was attempting to power the house with a new contraption, and Cousin ITT was in the midst of a highly important but entirely incomprehensible conversation. But Wednesday was alone in her room, reading an ancient text on necromancy that she discovered in the family's cavernous library. As she murmured an incantation, her room began to grow colder. The candlelight flickered as though alive, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Suddenly, one of those shadows solidified. It crept up the wall like dark molasses, forming a sinister silhouette. Wednesday stared, fascinated yet wary. She had summoned many a supernatural entity before, but never one like this. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice laced with both curiosity and caution. "I am your shadow," replied the figure, its voice a raspy echo that made even Wednesday shiver. "I am the darkness you have yet to embrace, the part even you fear to unleash." A cold wind blew through the room, making the curtains billow like spectral apparitions. Wednesday, who prided herself on fearing nothing, found herself gripping her book of necromancy tightly. "What do you want?" she asked, her words piercing the icy atmosphere. "To become one with you." "You've denied me for too long," the shadow hissed, stretching longer and darker, as though reaching for her. "No," Wednesday replied firmly. "We all have darkness within us, but some parts are meant to be controlled, not embraced." With that, she began chanting a powerful banishment spell from her book, her voice ringing clear and resonant. The shadow on the wall writhed in agony, its form twisting and distorting as if trying to escape an invisible force. "You cannot banish me forever. I am a part of you," it screeched as it began to shrink. "And that is why you can never truly leave." "But you have no place in this world," Wednesday retorted, concluding her incantation. With a guttural scream, the shadow disintegrated into a burst of smoke, leaving only a dark stain on the wall, which faded away like a forgotten nightmare. Wednesday closed her book and took a deep breath. She felt lighter, but also strangely hollow, as though a part of her had indeed been ripped away. Just then, the door burst open and Gomez and Morticia rushed in, eyes wide with parental concern and excitement at the prospect of a new family calamity. "Wednesday, my dear, we felt a disturbance in the..." "Oh," Gomez stopped as he saw the tranquility that had settled over his daughter's room. "Did we miss the fun?" Morticia inquired, her eyes slightly disappointed. Wednesday smiled enigmatically. "Oh, you have no idea." And so, life, or whatever you'd call the Addams family's peculiar existence, resumed its course, with one less shadow but no less mystery. Still, every so often, Wednesday would glance at her wall, half expecting her shadow to reappear, a dark reminder of the untapped depths even she hesitated to explore. And somewhere in the farthest corners of the mansion, a shadowy figure lingered, watching, waiting, ever a part of the darkness that was Wednesday Addams. Olivia had always been a looker, but like so many modern women, she aspired for more. Liposuction, breast augmentation, rhinoplasty, given her financial means, all these were within reach. This time, however, she decided to take it up a notch with a surgery that promised to change her life forever. The clinic she chose wasn't one of those flashy places on Rodeo Drive, but rather a secluded facility off the beaten path. Exclusive services, they promised. Olivia signed all the required forms without even reading them, putting her full trust in the medical professionals. After the surgery, the doctors told her everything had gone exceptionally well. She woke up in the recovery room, groggy from anesthesia, unable to move. She felt that something was off but couldn't quite put her finger on it. As the anesthesia wore off, she looked down and saw Pig's limbs where her arms and legs used to be. Panic seized her. She tried to scream, but all that came out was a strangled squeal. She realized she couldn't even speak. At that moment, the doctor walked in. "Ah, you're awake," he said, smiling. "Don't worry, everything went as planned." "What's happened to me? What is this?" Olivia tried to say, but only pathetic noises came out. "You signed a waiver and consented to an experimental procedure," the doctor continued. "So, legally, we're covered." Olivia understood that she had stumbled into a nightmare with no escape. Days turned into weeks, and Olivia never adjusted to her new body. She became the subject of ongoing medical research, forgotten by everyone except the scientists who continued their experiments. The most terrifying part was that Olivia began to notice not just her body but also her mind starting to change. She increasingly felt an inexplicable urge to wallow in mud and consume strange foods. Her consciousness was slowly fading away, leaving her with a new, horrifying reality. The last thing Olivia remembered before losing her humanity entirely was the doctor saying the experiment was a success. Time to move on to the next phase. Another drop of dark liquid splattered onto the game board. "If we don't reach the cabin, if we don't finish the game, we all die." She collapsed back down into the carpet, breathing hard. Then with a shaking, vomit-covered hand, she grabbed the die. "Kara, your turn." She held it out to me. I paused, staring at the die. Then I shook my head. I don't know what is going on here, but I'm out. And with that, I turned on my heel and marched straight for the front door. But it wouldn't open. What the fuck? I tugged at the door with all my might. It didn't budge. With a scream, I grabbed my mom's expensive vase off the front table and threw it at the window. It shattered to a million pieces, but the window didn't even crack. Maybe we should just finish the game. I whirled around to see Elise standing behind me. She stared at me with wide, dark eyes. "Please, Kara," she whispered. "I don't want to die. We're not going to die. This is just some stupid prank." "Then why can't we open the door? Why can't we call anyone?" I looked at the door, my heart sinking. Then I slowly walked back towards the family room. The smell of decay had intensified. Damp, cold air clung to my skin. I stepped into the room and... crunch! Something was under my feet. I looked down to see a few dried leaves, laying on top of the carpet. And that's when I noticed the room was different. A pale, yellow moon hung outside the window, even though by this hour, it should have been high in the sky. A green lichen bloomed on the rough, gray upholstery of the sofa. The blind cords hung down to the floor like vines, and the massive tangled cords that ran to the TV looked more like roots twisted around each other. I swallowed and sat across from Brianna. Without a word, I took the die. Let it fall, drew my card. I let out a sigh of relief. You cross a stream and stop for a drink. Go forward 2 spaces. I advanced my game piece, then handed the die, now coated in a thin layer of vomit and blood, to Elise. I could feel her hand shake as she took it from me. Clack. Thwip. Elise's eyes widened as she stared at the card. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Just a horrible, choking sound. And then I heard it. A sound I've only ever heard once before in my life, more than a decade ago. But filled me with absolute terror. A soft, rattling sound. Coming from the corner of the room. Elise slowly turned her card around, and I saw the words, "Rattlesnake attack." Go back to start. A soft slithering sound echoed across the room. Elise scrambled back, climbing up onto the sofa. I glanced down at the carpet in the dim light, trying to pinpoint the snake's location. But it wasn't carpet anymore. Wet muck covered with decaying, damp leaves. Twisted roots and jagged rocks. The slithering sound grew louder and I froze, staring into the darkness, in the direction of the sound. Kara, Brianna choked. You have to finish the game. I glanced at the board. I was 7 spaces away from the cabin. Just a few more turns and I could make it to the cabin. I snatched the die. It stuck to my fingers, staining my fingers red. I let it go and it tumbled across the painted trees. 3, damn. I'd have to roll a 5 or 6 to make it next turn. I snatched the card from the top of the deck, and all the blood drained out of my face. It's behind you. Go back 1 space. I immediately felt warm breath on the back of my neck. I squeezed my eyes tight, trying not to imagine what it was. But I'd seen a shadow, in my peripheral vision, stretching out behind me. A shadow with long, spindly arms, reaching out for me. The rattling sound jolted me back into action. It was loud, only several feet away from me. Elise was crumpled into the couch, crying. Brianna was retching. I grabbed the die, shook it, and let it fall. 6, relief flooded me. I grabbed my red game piece and dropped it on the cabin. Clack. I looked up at Elise, shaking and staring at me, and Brianna, pale and trembling, lying on the floor. But they were alive. And there was only silence. We never spoke of Zukari again. Over the coming months, Brianna, Elise, and I grew apart. After graduation, Elise went on to get her bachelor's. Brianna left Dave and got a job in the city. I stayed here, living with my parents as I continued at the IT company I'd been interning with. But over the past few weeks, I've been seeing things. Like a few days ago, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a man in blood-stained hiking clothes, facing away from me, standing still in my hallway. Or when I took a bath to unwind from a particularly hard day at work, and felt something brush my ankle. Or when I felt a gust of warm breath on the back of my neck as I made myself dinner. And then there was last night. I woke up in the middle of the night, around 4 a.m. And I saw something outside that made my blood run cold. A golden light, shining through the window of an old, abandoned cabin. And what Brianna said echoed in my mind. The game isn't over until you reach the cabin. Don't play the Can You Hide game if it appears on your phone. You won't find it on Google Play or the App Store. There's nothing about the game on any public websites other than this cautionary post. It doesn't matter whether you're a good or a bad person. It indiscriminately chooses targets. The point is that you can't avoid the game. Nobody can. You might hear a reverberating ding from your phone, a death toll from the depths of hell. An incongruous window might pop up. Can you hide? Yes. No, make sure you select no. When the window first appeared on my phone screen, I was stunned. I always presumed smartphones to be safer from the threat of viruses than computers. Especially a brand new iPhone. Isn't Apple supposed to be superior to Microsoft when it comes to security? Nice try, I said. But before I made a rash decision and ended up infecting my phone with something nasty, I decided to do some research. I'm not exactly computer savvy, but I didn't trust either the yes or no option. I didn't want to mess with the window in any way. There was nothing about the Can You Hide pop-up online. I didn't even realize it was a game until a Reddit user, who I won't name, pointed me in the direction of a Discord server for discussing unearthly matters. There was an entire category dedicated to the bizarre new game that had been appearing on people's phones. Clicking yes, apparently, commences a hide-and-seek game of unknown origin. I scrolled through the many Discord messages. I've removed the usernames. User 1. Can anyone help me? Nobody seems to know anything about this game. My friend played it nonstop for a week, and then he went missing. That was 2 weeks ago. There are daily search parties, but I don't think they're going to find him. He said it wasn't really a game. He said he saw a face outside his window. User 2. You have to select no. User 3. I destroyed my phone after reading these messages. Haven't seen or heard anything unusual. User 4. I selected no, but I keep hearing creaks. And I don't think it's in my head. User 6. Just leave the pop-up window open, guys. You don't have to select anything. User 5. What? For the rest of my life? What if something accidentally knocks it? User 3. Destroy your phone. Like I said, it worked for me. User 6. Until it pops up on your next phone. User 5. What if I just turn off my phone? That seems a little less dramatic than destroying it. User 3. Your funeral. The more I read, the more anxious I felt. I had expected the pop-up window to be a virus, but everybody was telling ghost stories. Stop being a superstitious baby, I told myself. That guy's disappearance had nothing to do with the game he was playing. Eventually, after a weekend of horrified contemplation, I opted for User 5's idea to turn off my phone. In fact, I took it a step farther and reset my phone to its factory settings. I met my friends, Corey and Tanya, in a local park on Monday afternoon. I'd planned to tell them about my experience, but they beat me to the punch. "Why didn't you pick up your phone all weekend, Lee?" Corey asked me. "We were worried about you, man. We wanted to hang out on Sunday." I didn't fancy third-wheeling. "Some of us have to go to work on Mondays," I replied. "Hey, I work," Corey protested. "From a bathrobe in your bedroom," Tanya smirked. "You're both just envious that I can scroll through Reddit and play games away from the watchful eye of my employer," Corey said. "Speaking of games, Lee, have you played Can You Hide?" My heart plummeted, and I felt as if Corey's words were cinder blocks, dragging my body through the floorboards. "He's obsessed," Tanya sighed. "He's been playing it every day since Tuesday. It just popped up on my phone, so I thought, why not?" Corey laughed. "Tanya thought it must be a virus, but it's just a cool augmented reality game." Corey thrust his phone down on the wooden picnic table. It was already open on a game window, a map of our surrounding area. A small green marker indicated Corey's location in the park, and there was a small red marker moving along nearby roads. Once a day, from 2 to 4 in the afternoon, the game takes place. I have to hide. It tracks my location in the real world, so I have to keep moving. I wanted to delay coming to the park, but I don't think the Red Seeker will find me here. Besides, it's 10 to 4. "Nearly made it," Corey said. "What's the red marker that's searching for you?" I asked, shuddering. "The boogeyman," Corey whispered. He laughed, and Tanya thumped him on the arm. "You know that kind of talk makes Lee freak out," Tanya scolded. Corey shrugged, and the pair of them became absorbed in a different topic of conversation. They were tucking into their sandwiches, talking between mouthfuls, but I wasn't eating. I couldn't take my eyes off Corey's phone on the table. The red marker was circling the park, looking for him. I couldn't stop thinking about those people on the Discord server who had spoken so solemnly of the supposedly deadly game. Suddenly, the marker was in the park. Corey was wrong. It had found him. I prepared for something dreadful to happen. I prepared for my friend to be caught. "And that's a wrap," Corey said, scooping up his phone. 4 o'clock. Yet again, I bested the game. It got close this time, though. Damn. Just 100 yards away. On the game map, the park was a featureless green patch. I could see Corey's green marker, scarcely standing out from the grass, and I could see the red marker northeast of our location. The victory box read, "You avoided the creeker by 121 yards. You can hide." Tanya groaned and mumbled about Corey's game addiction, and the two of them resumed their conversation. I was about to dive back into reality, putting the silly game out of my head for good, but a sudden noise terrified me. A creak. My eyes shot up from the table. Neither Tanya nor Corey seemed to notice the eerie noise. And I can't explain it, as nearby as the sound seemed, my eyes were drawn to a solitary tree, a little over 100 yards away. Perhaps not exactly where the red marker had appeared on Corey's screen, but close enough. Peering around the bark was a frightful face. The thing looking at the three of us was not human. It was as short as a toddler. Its head, if it even had a head, was wearing a peach-colored rubber mask, almost the tone of human flesh, but not quite. And its sickly sweet smile seared through my eyes into my very soul. With a second resounding creak, the nightmarish face snapped behind the bark, disappearing from view. "Earth to Lee," Tanya said, giggling. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I think somebody's actually seeking you, Corey," I whispered, pointing a shaky finger at the tree. "I don't think you should play that game anymore." "Your phasmophobia really kills my buzz sometimes, Lee," Corey sighed. "There's no boogeyman following me. I have a proclivity for trembling at everyday sights and sounds. In my mind, there's always a ghost or a ghoul around the corner. Ever since my parents died, I've been that way. But I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I hadn't imagined what I saw behind the tree. Unfortunately, my phasmophobia, fear of ghosts and the supernatural, makes it very difficult for anybody to believe me when I've been startled by something. Corey and Tanya told me to take it easy and get lots of rest. The following day, the two of them pinged me incessantly on WhatsApp. I was still reeling from the terrifying thing I'd seen behind the tree. Transfixed by terrible thoughts, the workday flew by. I was starting to believe that maybe I'd become unwell. Perhaps I'd suffered a psychotic break. Not so. Around 5:30 in the evening, on my drive home from work, Tanya called me. I answered via my car's dashboard. "I'm driving right now, Tanya," I said. "What's dash?" I trailed off when I heard my friend bawling her eyes out on the other end of the phone. "It's in the house," she whispered. The game started playing. "It's later than usual." "Slow down," I replied. "What's happening?" "The game started at 6, Tanya tearfully explained in a fragile whisper. "I think you were right, Lee. I think someone's actually seeking us." We saw a horrible face at the window, and then there were creaking sounds in the house. "We're hiding in the attic." Corey's pulled the door up, "So we don't think dash have you called the police?" I interjected, heart pounding. "They're on the way," Tanya said. 15 minutes. "If we can." "What?" "It's Lee." "No, I feel safer with someone on the other end of the..." "Okay." "Corey wants me to hang up. He wants us to be quiet." "Okay, I understand," I shakily replied. "Just make sure dash..." No. Tanya whimpered. I didn't need to ask what had frightened her. I heard it too. A creak in the attic. It sounded so clear and, once again, so near. So nightmarishly near that I snapped my neck around to make sure the rubber-faced demon wasn't in the backseat of my car. It wasn't. At that point, I decided not to go home. I diverted to Corey's house. An 8-minute journey. Barely any quicker than the police. "How did it even get in here?" Tanya whispered. "I didn't even see the door open." My dead ex-boyfriend uploaded his consciousness online, and he's stalking me. Any woman who has ever spurned a man's advances already knows my story. Rejecting someone you have known and loved is, I think, even more perilous than rejecting a stranger. Edward and I dated for 6 months. He was an exceptional man in so many ways, but he soon revealed his contemptible side, and that soured the relationship. Signaled by numerous red flags, I broke up with him. He couldn't accept that. His relentless pursuit began. The monstrous man had veiled his true evil for so many months. I think he'd been aching to free it. His vengeance was savage and unyielding. Threatening social media posts. Candid photos he'd taken of me. An emailed schedule of my family's movements. A restraining order did nothing to stop him. Nevertheless, after months of fear, the horrendous stalking came to a bitter end. In December, Edward tragically froze to death in his snow-covered, beaten-up, unheated Ford Mustang. He had been waiting outside my house for hours at the blistering height of winter. A neighbor found him in the morning. Cards on the table. Edward wasn't even his real name, and I'm not exactly sure why I'm protecting his identity, given that he's dead. I guess I'm still scared of him. Understandable, given that even death hasn't halted his heinous hunt. Edward was a technological wizard. That was his true love. He called himself an innovator. Not a programmer, an artist. During the final month of our relationship, as I started to doubt the man's ethical compass, he became obsessed with the idea of the human soul. Artificial intelligence bored him. The future, he said, was a mesh of man and machine. Immortality. He believed he could upload the human consciousness to a computer. He didn't invent the concept, of course. Mind uploading is a well-documented hypothetical among scientists and philosophers alike. He's watched too many sci-fi films, I thought. But I suppose science fiction often becomes reality, doesn't it? Many people think it's impossible to upload the human consciousness to a computer, but I suppose they only think in terms of computing. Edward's research went beyond ordinary programming. He was ranting and raving about gray code, an underground programming language of the occult. His eerie obsession didn't faze me, in all honesty. I would have endured the plight of the suffering artist, had he not struck me across the face on one particular evening. Abuse was the line. Edward apologized profusely, of course. But the longer I ignored him, the more violent his messages grew. After his death last month, I thought the torture would cease. It did, for a couple of weeks, but then awful things started happening. Edward, nice sunset, Natasha. That was his comment on a recent Instagram picture of me. My friends flooded my DMs, asking whether I thought Edward's account had been hacked. Obviously. What an asinine question. The man was dead. It had to be somebody's perverse prank. But I'd blocked Edward's account, which made the whole ordeal quite traumatizing for me. I thought somebody had bypassed Instagram's security. That made me feel vulnerable. I contacted Instagram about it. They apologized, suspended his account, and I thought that was the end of it. The comments persisted, however. And it wasn't just happening on Instagram. It was happening on every one of my social accounts. I believed that somebody was tormenting me, maybe one of Edward's crazy relatives who blamed me for his untimely death. I told the police, and they promised to conduct a thorough investigation. Yeah, right. I was a little shaken, but I wouldn't say I was scared. The cyber harassment had stirred some of the old trauma and fear, but I felt resilient. Nobody could scare me as much as Edward, and Edward was dead. I was convinced that it was some idiot with a vile vendetta. It was what happened a week ago that defied all rational explanation and filled me with fear unlike any I've ever experienced. One night, I was lying in bed, and a ping from my laptop startled me. It was open on my desk, less than a foot from the end of my bed. I certainly hadn't left it open, I hadn't left it switched on, for that matter. And I hadn't left it on Facebook. Who even uses Facebook anymore? The screen was scrolling by itself. Somebody's hacked my computer. That was my first thought. The mystery hacker was looking at Edward's profile. The scrolling stopped, and I found myself staring at an old photo of Edward and me at a party. It was from the early days of our relationship. We looked happy. I get it, Ryan, I murmured, assuming Edward's brother to be behind the torture. It's my fault that he's dead. And then something horrifying happened. The photo moved. To be more specific, Edward moved. I, like everything and everyone else in that picture, remained static. But Edward, suddenly untethered, strolled over to the photographer. He was engulfing every square inch of the full-screen photo. My dead ex-boyfriend was staring through the laptop screen. Staring at me. What is this? I cried breathlessly. I wasn't even sure how it was possible to override Facebook in that way, but I still felt that everything was within the realm of possibility. It's Ryan. It has to be Ryan. That didn't explain how he doctored an old photograph to include a moving video of Edward. Deepfake technology? Hello, Natasha, Edward said. His voice was garbled, as if he were swirling in a blender. My chest tightened. Did Edward record himself to torture me from beyond the grave? I wondered. You look so beautiful, his inhuman voice gushed. I like your new hair. And the dog pajamas are adorable. I yelped quietly. It couldn't be a pre-recording. How would he have known that I'd changed my hairstyle? How could he have known about the new pajamas? Ryan. It has to be Ryan. He's watching me through my webcam. And then something happened which couldn't be attributed to Ryan. Edward's demeanor shifted. As had been the case in our 6-month relationship, he swiftly transitioned from a genial gentleman to a vehement villain. His pixelated head tilted to one side, as if he were simply ogling me from a fresh angle. His smile had only changed ever so slightly, but it was now brimming with malignancy. The dead man's charm was vanishing. So were his pupils, for that matter. Seconds later, all that remained were two white, soulless eyes. It felt as if I were seeing the real Edward at long last. The subhuman thing that lay dormant beneath his scintillating shell. A thunderous thudding sound sent a shockwave through my body. Horrified, I watched Edward's hands pressing against the screen of my laptop. As if he were trapped underwater, he continued to push against the surface of the pixelated pool. The screen continued to flex. I screamed in unbridled terror. I finally accepted that it wasn't Ryan. It wasn't anything that could be explained by earthly rhyme or reason. I wasn't going to wait for my undead abuser. Never again. I scarpered from my bed, beelining for the door of my room. Before I could flee, there was a blinding flash of light from my laptop screen. The door swung shut, and a piercing sound emitted from the speakers of my laptop. It sounded like a ghastly cry of agony. "You're not leaving me again," Edward commanded. I rotated to face the digital entity that was slithering free from my laptop screen, which was stretching around him like elasticated rubber. When he finally escaped his digital prison, Edward's long limbs glitched ghoulishly before me. He adjusted his posture, standing upright and gazing upon me with wide, empty eyes. My stalking specter widened his fiendish Cheshire cat grin. "I found a way to live forever," he whispered. "If you join me, I promise we won't ever fight again." I tirelessly battled to open my bedroom door, which was being held shut by an invisible force. Twisting my head to look at the monstrous creature behind me, I whimpered in horror. Edward slowly stumbled towards me on unsteady, glitching legs, toppling his head to one side. I screeched at the top of my lungs and turned back to face the door, desperately yanking the handle. That was when I had a dreadful idea. I darted towards my bedside table, swerving past Edward's outstretched arms. Picking up a half-full glass of water in one hand, I turned to face my ex-boyfriend. His lips parted, and a pit of blackness was revealed. That same high-pitched wail erupted from the caverns of his demonic body. He knew what I was about to do. Without a moment's thought, I launched the glass of water at the digital ghoul that was lumbering towards me. Edward screamed in a robotic cry so deafeningly loud that my ears popped. As the water soaked through his shimmering, translucent skin, he began to spasm manically. His unbound digital form retreated, and I watched the laptop screen reclaim him. My bedroom door swung open, so I assumed my undead stalker must simply have been too distracted to keep me trapped. I seized my opportunity and fled my flat. I have been living in my car for the past few days. This is the first time I've used technology since the incident. I'm currently in a computer cafe. There are plenty of people around, and I don't think Edward would come for me in a public place, but who knows? I just wanted to post here because I need help. I don't know where to go or what to do. I have nightmares of being imprisoned in Edward's eternal digital prison. I keep seeing flickering screens out of the corner of my eye. Should I get off the grid and avoid technology for the rest of my life? I can't run. He's everywhere. Long ago, in a small village nestled deep in the mountains of Japan, a traveler arrived seeking answers to a strange mystery. It was said that on moonless nights, a woman would appear in the village, haunting the dreams of those who saw her and bringing misfortune to their lives. Undeterred by the rumors, the traveler set out to investigate the mystery. He spoke with the villagers, learning more about the woman and the dark secrets that shrouded the village. As he delved deeper into the mystery, he began to sense a sinister presence lurking in the shadows. He heard whispers in the wind and saw fleeting glimpses of the mysterious woman in the corners of his vision. One moonless night, as the traveler wandered the village, he saw her, the woman who haunted the dreams of the villagers. She was beautiful, with long black hair and piercing eyes that seemed to look into his very soul. But as she approached him, the traveler felt a sense of dread wash over him. He knew that this was not a woman, but a vengeful spirit, seeking revenge for some past injustice. The traveler tried to run, but the spirit pursued him relentlessly, her long hair trailing behind her like serpents. He could feel her icy breath on the back of his neck, and hear her whispers in his ear. As the traveler stumbled and fell to the ground, he realized that he had fallen victim to the curse of the vengeful spirit. He was doomed to wander the village, haunting the dreams of those who dared to tread on the dark path he had chosen. And so it was that the traveler became a legend in the village, a cautionary tale whispered around campfires and passed down through the generations. For those who dared to seek the truth behind the mystery of the moonless nights, they knew that they did so at their own peril, for the vengeful spirit still lurked in the shadows, waiting for her next victim. The vengeful spirit that haunted the moonless nights in the remote Japanese village was a creature of darkness and malevolence, born from a great injustice that had been committed against her in life. In death, she sought revenge upon the living, tormenting those who had wronged her and their descendants for generations to come. Her form was that of a beautiful woman, with long black hair and piercing eyes that glowed with an eerie light. But despite her beauty, she emanated a cold and menacing presence, striking fear into the hearts of those who encountered her. Legend had it that the spirit possessed great powers, capable of manipulating the elements and weaving illusions that could drive a person mad. She could cause crops to wither and die, and summon storms that would ravage the village. Some claimed that she had even been known to possess the bodies of the living, using them as vessels to carry out her dark will. But her greatest power lay in her ability to curse those who saw her, haunting their dreams and bringing misfortune to their lives. Those who crossed her path were doomed to a life of misery and sorrow, unless they could find a way to lift the curse. Some whispered that the spirit was the embodiment of a powerful demon, summoned from the depths of the underworld by a powerful sorcerer. Others claimed that she was the vengeful ghost of a wronged woman, seeking justice in death for the injustices she had suffered in life. Whatever the truth may be, the vengeful spirit remained a terrifying presence in the village, haunting the moonless nights and striking fear into the hearts of those who dared to cross her path. Years had passed since the last traveler had come to the remote Japanese village, seeking answers to the mystery of the vengeful spirit that haunted the moonless nights. But one day, a new traveler arrived, determined to unravel the secrets that had long been hidden away. Unlike the previous traveler, this one was well-versed in the ways of magic and the supernatural. He had studied under the greatest masters of the occult, and possessed knowledge and power that few could match. The traveler spoke with the villagers, learning more about the vengeful spirit and the dark forces that had brought her into being. He studied ancient texts and consulted with the spirits of the dead, seeking a way to defeat the curse and save the village from its malevolent influence. Days turned into weeks, and the traveler spent long hours in meditation and study, honing his skills and preparing for the inevitable confrontation with the vengeful spirit. And then, one moonless night, she appeared before him, the vengeful spirit, with her long black hair and piercing eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light. But the traveler was ready. He drew forth a talisman from his robes, chanting ancient incantations that summoned the power of the elements to his aid. He stood his ground as the spirit approached, her cold and menacing presence washing over him. But the traveler was not afraid. He knew that he possessed the power to defeat her, to break the curse that had plagued the village for so many years. And so he raised his hand, calling forth a bolt of lightning that struck the vengeful spirit with a deafening crash. She wailed in pain, her form flickering and fading as the curse was broken. The traveler watched as the vengeful spirit vanished into the night, her power broken and her influence lifted. He knew that the village would never be haunted again by her malevolent presence, and that the curse had been lifted forever. The villagers gathered around the traveler, thanking him for his bravery and his skill in defeating the vengeful spirit. They knew that they owed him a great debt, and promised to honor him and his memory for generations to come. And so it was that the traveler became a legend in the village, a hero who had saved them from the dark forces that had plagued them for so many years. His name was whispered with reverence and awe, a symbol of hope and courage in a world that was often filled with darkness and despair.